listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com.
dfcradio.com.
Welcome to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com. This is your host, Emily, and it is June 30th, 2015, the last day of the month. And we're almost to the 4th of July, which is going to be on Saturday. Now, I have to comment something. I usually don't comment on a lot of current events and things that are in the news, but if you have been on the internet or anywhere in the last week, you can definitely say that the whole world, or it seems like the U.S., has completely lost their shit online. We had a few changes last week. The Confederate flag came down. There was a horrible shooting in the South. We had gay marriage become legal, which is amazing. And it was Pride this weekend, all over. I'm close to San Francisco, so it was Pride on Sunday. And it seems like that was just a collective of so much stuff at once that people seem to have absolutely flipped on everything. And for me, it was a great week to ban and delete people from my friends list that opposing opinions are absolutely okay, but I was surprised at the amount of racist people that I had on my Facebook page. And there are certain things, if you decide to have viewpoints and you say it behind closed doors, cool. But Facebook isn't a closed door anymore. It's very public, and it was a good way to clean out my friends list. It was pretty amazing. It was so much good things has come out of this, and amazing how closed-minded some people are. And I have to remember that I've always lived in very liberal areas. I grew up in a liberal state. I live in a liberal area in California, and I don't think I could live in the South personally. It's been a crazy week, and we shall see how all these changes affect us. And we're going into an election year next year, and I am just not looking forward to it. I absolutely hate election years. It's where grown-ups act like little kids and throw tantrums and throw anybody under the bus to get what they want. So we shall see what this election year and this new freedoms and people saying they're being persecuted for their religion and all this stuff, we have to just see how it plays out. But congratulations for gay marriage finally being recognized, and everybody gets a chance to be miserably married. No, I'm kidding. Everyone gets a chance to be married if they so choose to. So good on that part. Woohoo! I'm totally in support of it. So sorry if you aren't. I am. So people lost their shit. So after Pride, after the Confederate flag, after legalized marriage, we also have the 4th of July that's coming up. And the 4th of July is a celebration of commemorating the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. So it's also known as Independence Day, commonly known as the 4th of July or July 4th. It's a federal holiday in the United States. It commemorates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, declaring independence from Great Britain. Independence Day is commonly associated with fireworks, parades, barbecues, carnivals, fairs, picnics, concerts, baseball games, family reunions, political speeches, ceremonies, or just taking a day and not doing anything. I'm moving, so I'm going to celebrate my day doing that. Personally, for me as a family, growing up, the 4th of July was always a big holiday. I grew up outside of California in the 80s, so that means you could actually have real fireworks. Fireworks that get shot off into the air. I remember as a child having Roman candle wars and how much fun they were, and my mom used to get so pissed at us. I also came from a family whose father thought that half a stick of dynamite was an amazing firework, and sometimes he'd catch stuff on fire, and sometimes he'd blow up my mom's stumps and landscaping. As kids, we thought it was hilarious. So I love the fact that I grew up in the 80s, and I have extremely fond memories of doing parades, being in 4-H, having family barbecues. We had a log rodeo where I grew up, so we always had the log rodeo. We did all the Western stuff. It was so much fun. So I hope everyone has a great 4th of July. Has good picnics, have good food. It's a perfect time for a barbecue. So, like I said, I get to go move during that time. But it's a great, fun weekend that's coming up. And it's going to be a long weekend. Now, I will say this is a public service announcement. Please, if you decide to drink, be safe and sane. Do not drive. It's not worth it. And 11 years ago, I was actually in a drunk driving accident, and I was not driving, but both of us, and it was my best friend and I, were drinking, and she was the one driving, and we were on four-wheelers, and we did get into an accident, and I got to watch my best friend die in front of me, and 11 years later, it still has a profound effect on my life, and I just have to say it's not worth it. Don't drink and drive. Don't use four-wheelers. Don't drive a car. We have things like Uber. We have things like Lyft, AA. We have AAA that you can call and get a ride home if you need to. If it is something that you need to stay away from drinking, there's AA meetings. They have alcothons on long holiday weekends. So there's many options out there. Just don't drink and drive. Don't lose a family member or a friend. Unfortunately, I lost a best friend of mine who was a friend for 16 years, and it was 11 years ago that she passed away, and it happened on July 3rd, and July 3rd still kind of fucks with me. It kind of messes with my brain, and it's not an easy holiday for that. So please be safe and sane. That's my PSA. So on to lighter things, since it seems like the internet and everything is kind of crazy. We're going to talk about gardening, and today I'm specifically going to talk about water. And if you're in California, we have this huge water shortage, and water is an amazing thing. So I will be talking with Evan Folds. And it's a 2-part interview. So the first one is 15 minutes, and then we'll go to a break, and we'll come back and finish it, and it's about 20 minutes after that. We'll also be hearing from the Wisconsin vegetable gardeners. They have gardening in 2 minutes. They are going to be talking about alternatives to all-purpose flour. So that's gardening in 2 minutes. And we are going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we'll hear about water. Now, if you are interested in becoming an advertiser for any of the shows on the DFC radio network, please contact Aaliyah, and that's ALEA at dfcradio.com. You can also check out all of the shows if you're listening. If you're listening through the website, you can look at all the different shows that are available, or you can download the apps if you are on the road. And we have a iOS, so an Apple one, and we do have a Droid app. So if you cannot listen from the website, download the app. You can get to all the shows on DFC Radio Network. So we're going to take a brief break, and we will be back. So this is Emily on dfcradio.com.
We're listening to dfcradio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com. Hey, Dr. Duff, are you signing up for another one of those internet dating sites after your divorce?
Nah, I'm just ordering these freaking douchebags from China here. Just gonna be saving a lot of money on it. About $1 a bag.
Did you say douchebags?
Yeah, they're pots. They're fabric pots. They're, made in China. They save $1 a bag from all the other.
Oh, it sounds like an imitation smart pot or something.
Yeah, save $1, but, I'm pretty sure these douchebags are gonna work.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine who used those same douchebags. He bought them direct from China. It killed his whole garden.
Bro, what? So I'm better off spending that extra $1 on a smart pot?
I'd get a smart pot.
Don't be a duff man. Make sure to buy the original patented Smart Pot. Check them out at smartpots.com.
dfcradio.com.
This is Emily with A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com, and today I'm talking with Evan Folds from Progress Earth. How are you doing today, Evan?
Hey, Emily, I'm good, thanks.
So, if you do not know, Progress Earth is the company that does, obviously, the Vortex Brewers. They do some great compost tea and have some fantastic products. But Evan is also a writer, a well-known writer, and knows a lot on the subject of gardening, water, but a lot of gardening stuff. So today we're going to talk a little bit about water, which is the basic of H2O. That's basically, that is water. It's what it is. But what else is there about water? There's a lot more that goes along with it. It's something besides just coming out of your kitchen sink, coming out of the hose. It actually comes from somewhere, and there's a lot of elements that go along with water. So what can you tell us a little bit about water today, Evan?
Asking what is water is kind of a loaded question because it's always different in some way, shape, or form. And, water H2O is a very oversimplified explanation, and it's really convenient for a textbook. But the takeaway of water is that it's probably the simplest thing in our life, and at the same time the most complicated. The further that we look into what water is supposed to be, the less we realize that we really know what it is. There's a lot of different ways you can approach that question, but from a molecular standpoint, the thing to remember is that water is a polar molecule. It's got a hydrogen, two hydrogens and an oxygen. It's got a polarity, a dipole moment it's called, which means it's got a positive and a negative end electrically. And that's why it's the universal solvent. Water, the rainwater, the pure relative pureness of rainwater created the Grand Canyon. So in that respect, water's role is to pick things up and carry them around in a physical standpoint, from a molecular, and that's kind of where most people connect with water is the physical aspects of it, the hydration potential, these types of things. But the real fascinating aspect of water, and something that is really a lot harder to put your finger on, is how water is influenced by vibration, and also the surface chemistry of different materials. Water has a great sensitivity, and it's basically the backbone of homeopathic medicine. Is really dovetails biodynamic agriculture, and that's something that we really have a focus on in regards to the Vortex Brewer. And what you're really doing is you're using water as a medium to carry out vibrations into a living system. And a lot of people kind of roll their eyes and have a hard time connecting with the idea of energy and subtle energies and vibrations and frequencies and these types of things. But I definitely invite people to consider that there's more to life than what's physically here. I think most people would agree with that on a surface level. And I have no intention of going because that's where wars are started. You start getting into, well, what is that? But the point is that there's a reason a plant grows up against gravity. There's a reason that our body doesn't just fall apart into the pieces that make it up. So water is the medium at which the subtle energies of life communicate with each other, and vortexing water is principal to that idea. And if you carry that out into nature, you see a river meandering, you see a wave curling, you see how water doesn't fall through a drain, it spirals. With the Vortex Brewer, we don't make a vortex, we allow it, and it's very true. So rarely do people stop and think about what water wants. They simply use it to dissolve their fertilizers in, and as a commodity. So when you can kind of allow yourself to think for a second that there's different kinds of water, and if you treat water in different ways, that it can benefit you greatly, and we can talk about some of those benefits, that's really where you can start getting some traction that you never really would have accomplished without inviting yourself to think in that way. And that's really a lot of what we try to do is challenge people to think outside of the materialistic box and really start to get some traction from an energetic standpoint. So, that's kind of a nutshell of what water can be, and there's a lot of different ways we could go. So I'll be happy to follow your lead there.
Okay, and I will say typically when you learn about water, and I'm trying to think of some of my high school science classes, it's basically H2O. It's something that comes out of your sink. It doesn't go that much further until you start talking, at least with some of these biodynamic things, talking about structuring the water, and why we need water and why it's so important. I mean, besides drinking it, we always have the health benefits of saying that you drink, I think it's half your weight in ounces per day is what's recommended.
Yep.
And then we use it for, agriculture. This is how we grow our plants. And then we use it for, obviously, all of our food, too. If you're using raising cattle, any different kinds of meats that are out there. So it's something that we need every single day. But typically, you just think about it coming out of the sink. You don't usually go too much further into it.
Yeah, and that's I guess a perfect way to frame the point is, to take your example of human context. They're recommended to drink half your weight in ounces a day. You can do that and be medically dehydrated because the water is not hydrating your cells. It's just irrigating your kidneys. And the same thing applies with a plant. There's actually the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2003 was given for the discovery of what's called an aquaporin. And the aquaporin is a protein channel in a cell. And what it really means is that cells need to drink water one molecule at a time. So in that context of drinking all of this dead water coming through straight pipes and right angles out of a city water system that's been industrialized through the filtration processes that it has. It's got chlorines and chloramines and fluorines and all of these, pharmaceuticals that, people are flushing down the toilet and, all of these different things, is that completely denatures and overloads the ability of the water to deliver anything good. And yet at the same time, it can taste relatively the same because a lot of these contaminants have mechanisms of operation in the parts per billion range. I mean, if you look at something like Cialis, it's measured, the active ingredient is parts per billion in the amount that's delivered, and it obviously has a physiological effect, So this idea that somehow, we can't measure it in a parts per million, which is a lot of where the EPA ranges are that allow these things to be used, doesn't mean whatsoever that doesn't have a negative effect on us. And even one step further, even if you filtered that material out of the water, it can still retain the vibration, the remnant of that material in the water. And that's the special part of water that's really hard to get a firm grasp on because, one, we're not taught to think in that way in school like you described. If you look in a textbook, water's H2O, it's very convenient and easy to think that, well, that's all it is. But, literally one block can be different than the next based on the type of pipes that are being used. I mentioned surface chemistry. There's a lot of research. There's a guy named Dr. Gerald Pollack who I'm in conversation with, and he's a hero of mine because he's really championing a sector of science that is really hard for accomplished scientists to go down. And the reason is a lot of the resistance towards the energy and the qualitative aspects of water. If it can't be measured in hard data, scientists are often scared to go there because they get laughed at. And a perfect example is the concept of homeopathy in this surface. They call it the exclusion zone. And there's basically, it turns out that by the math, you should have a zone electrically on a surface. Let's say it's negatively charged. Well, it's going to attract the positive end, the hydrogen end of the water. So the conventional textbook arrangement is you have about 10 to 15 molecules deep of that positive charge being attracted by that negative surface. But what we end up seeing is more like a million molecules, which is totally outside of the framework of what should be happening. So what that means is that water is operating in a different way than a textbook would be able to tell us. And there's a huge gray area there. I mean, that's orders of magnitude. And yet there's really relatively little science that's been tread on there because, there's two different instances in history. One, the Russians showed which they're kind of at the forefront of water research. And we have no institutes in the United States that study water as important as it is. And that's kind of amazing to me anyway. But in Russia, these guys, I can't remember the guy's name. It's in Dr. Pollack's book, The Fourth Phase of Water, which I'd highly recommend people seek out. But it's basically, the gist of it is these Russians had pure water. They put it in these silica tubes. They call them capillary tubes to replicate, capillaries in our body. And what they found was the water had remnants of silica in it, which is, of course, glass. And so they proved all of these metrics of how water operates in this unique way. But then the people that come behind it and peer review the research say, oh, well, there's a contaminant in your source. So that issue of contamination is pervasive in water research because it's supposed to pick up everything, you know? So it gets blamed for a lot of the anomalies that are seen, and you kind of have this vicious cycle, and we can never really get to a point where everybody can agree that there's something weird going on that we're really not addressing and not able to materialistically. So there's a big gray area there, and Dr. Pollack is kind of at the forefront of trying to break that open.
And I will say a lot of our water would be considered contaminated, even what's coming out of our sinks as well. People flush stuff down the sinks, down the drains all the time. You always hear about the different medicines, or you have pills that are left over, just dump them down the sink, no big deal. And then you hear later on is we're testing our water and we're finding these huge levels of medicine that's in there that maybe not everyone wants. And also you have your water treatment for your cities or municipality. One of them being fluoride, which again, we can talk hours about fluoride. But there is a lot of stuff that actually goes into your water before it travels through the piping and comes out your faucet.
Yeah, there is. And you know, unfortunately, you have to deal with that contamination simply because of the way that we live. And, you know, granted, there's a huge responsibility on a water filtration mechanism to take all of that out. You know, as far as fluoridation goes, that's something that's done on purpose. And that's, I think, what's kind of remarkable about that scenario. We don't have to do it, and it actually turns out it's a local decision. So, you know, I definitely invite anybody out there that has questions about fluoridation or has never heard of that concept to look into it, because there's really a couple of points that are important. You know, one is it's indiscriminate. You know, there's nothing regulating the amount of fluoride that you're ingesting on a daily basis, because, you know, I could drink 20 glasses of water and you could drink 10, and, you know, we're in a scenario where a doctor would never prescribe a pill in that way. It's also, you know, the only thing that's against, the Nuremberg codes, basically, of human rights in regards to medication outside of consent. And, you know, another thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is that the fluoride that you have in your toothpaste, and incidentally, you're told to spit your toothpaste out for a reason, is a toxic industrial byproduct that comes through a water supply. What you get in toothpaste is actually a pharmaceutical grade sodium fluoride. So it doesn't have radioactive elements, it doesn't have cadmium and arsenic and all of these things that come from fluoridation that are really not tested for. And, you know, I could speak to that personally. I've done the research in my town for the last 10 years, engaged in my town. And, you know, it comes from a fertilizer plant in Aurora, North Carolina. It's caught in these scrubbers that liquefy it. And it's, you know, $1 million liability at least for these companies to get rid of. And they've somehow found a way to slow release it through the public water supply that half of 1% of the water is actually ingested anyway. So it's really just a way of remediating a toxin for industry more so than it is helping people's teeth. But the only way to really get these things out is through distillation, which is an expensive process without scale, and reverse osmosis, which can be a very expensive process in a high flow environment. May work for a kitchen with a reservoir of some sort, but really expensive to get your whole house on a reverse osmosis filter. And unfortunately, in the case of fluoride and a lot of the pharmaceutical contaminants, they're so small that the filters they're smaller than the water molecule. You know, fluorine is the smallest halogen, and it's smaller molecularly than chlorine and iodine, but it's the same type of material, and it's very aggressive. So specifically, people, I've seen a lot of research on this and know people anecdotally that have experienced this, people on low iodine diets, which is a lot of people that pay attention to what they eat are, because they don't eat table salt, which is the primary source of iodine in the modern diet, which is how it was sold to us, and that's a whole other can of worms. But, you know, that idea of not eating sea vegetables and sea salt not having iodine in it, you know, it tends to be low in a diet, specifically with people that are paying attention. So if you're replacing that by, you know, incidentally drinking fluoride, the fluorine molecule mimics the iodine and replaces it in the thyroid, and it creates thyroid cancers and all kinds of terrible issues. So, you know, paying attention to these things is not just the right thing to do. It's directly relevant to your health, and not only that, your garden's health. I mean, the same mechanisms apply. You know, I should say, we talked about aquaporins earlier in regards to human context. It's the same thing with plants. They have aquaporins in their cells. So the amount of fertilizer that you feed your plants is directly related with the ability of the water to deliver it to a cell. And if you can structure your water more properly so that it's it flows into the cell rather than you having to push. You can use half of the fertilizer that you normally use and get twice the benefit, simply because you're hitting the sweet spot. And so it applies to all of life.
Now, I will say, since we mentioned a little bit about fluoride, if you Google that, it can come up with a ton of somewhat conspiracy stuff. But I would say read some of the information on it. You can also email your local water board or your county to see what your treatment plans are, to see if there's any way that you might want to change it or join a board or get some more information, go to your local county meetings to see what's in there. I will say my last house that I lived in, I emailed them and they told me, no, we do not use fluoride in this area. Great. I'll just leave it right at that. But certain areas, actually most cities still use it. Every once in a while, I'll put on my Facebook page that such and such city voted not to put fluoride in their water anymore. So there are views changing on fluoride, but it will pull up somewhat conspiracy stuff on there.
I'll run away with you by my side. I'll run away with you by my side.
We're listening to DFCRadio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com. Hey, Dr. Duff, are you signing up for another one of those internet dating sites after your divorce?
Nah, I'm just ordering these freaking douchebags from China here. Just gonna be saving a lot of money on it. About $1 a bag.
Did you say douchebags?
Yeah, they're pots. They're fabric pots. They're, made in China. They save $1 a bag from all the other.
Oh, it sounds like an imitation smart pot or something.
Yeah, save $1, but, I'm pretty sure these douchebags are gonna work.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine who used those same douchebags. He bought them direct from China. It killed his whole garden.
Bro, what? So I'm better off spending that extra $1 on a smart pot?
I'd get a smart pot.
Don't be a Duff man. Make sure to buy the original patented Smart Pot. Check them out at smartpots.com.
DFCRadio.com.
It will, and that's a fair point. And I'd point out fluoridealert.org. They're a nonprofit, reputable source of valid, peer-documented information, and that would be a really good place to start. And you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of the things that are most controversial have that conspiratorial end, and just because people are looking conspiratorial, it doesn't make it not true, but it underlines the real ability of us collectively to accept it. And in the way I like to put it is you carry the burden of proof. If you're going to come out here guns blazing about all of these things that might have happened in the past that you can't prove and making wild claims, somebody's going to say, well, you're going to need to prove it to me. And they're going to look to the CDC, who's said it's one of the top 10 public health accomplishments of the last century. Yet at the same time, if you call the CDC, which I have, and I invite you to do it, they'll tell you point blank that we didn't make you do it. So there's this kind of vicious cycle of the responsibility of the due diligence being on the local municipality, and the federal agency saying, well, we're not mandating it, but we're going to endorse it. And round and round you go, because the municipality doesn't have the money to do the research, and they're believing the CDC and the ADA, and it just never really resolves itself. So the only way that you can really gain traction in a local capacity, in my experience, and I've paid attention to this for a long time, is to really engage them where it hurts in the pocketbook, and invite them to understand the liabilities of trucking these things around your town and, delivering it. You can get Freedom of Information Act. I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and we got a download of all of the communication within the water industry there, which is still overseen by the town, city council. In my town, it's done by a corporation, and that's, again, probably a whole other show. Don't sell your water to a company. But the point being is you can get this information, and when you see it, it can be quite alarming. There are days where if you're at 0.8 parts per million, where it's 4 parts per million in selective neighborhoods. It's a very hard thing to control in that respect. So definitely do your research, and I appreciate your willingness to bring it up. It's a really important issue.
And I will definitely check out that website, because I know I've Googled fluoride before, and it just comes up with some really good information and some really crazy information. But
the Russian gulags and the Nazis and the whole thing. And unfortunately, it's true. The first time sodium fluoride was used on people was in these places. It just carries baggage that you don't really want to go there. And when you're trying to connect with a friend on fluoridation,
I will see the major thing that people always says is it was used in Nazi Germany, and usually that's the starting off point, and then other things come in from there, and then you start reading this, and they're like, am I reading The Onion right now? Is this actually true? So you just got to find some good sources. So definitely check out the website that Evan just mentioned as a good starting out point, because if you just Google it, you can find out the craziest stuff. And not everything on the internet is true, sadly.
Thanks for that disclaimer.
As we all know that, but sometimes when you start looking at things that people consider conspiracies are going to come out a lot more crazy sounding than some really good, well-represented information as well.
Agreed.
So read through as much information as possible. Look at where the site's coming from. Is it a nonprofit? What kind of information? Who's actually writing for them? And you can probably narrow it down of, wow, this is a really good source as opposed to X, Y, and Z over here. Because I will say it's the same thing I find sometimes with growing information. YouTube videos, there's some great ones out there, and then there's some other ones that you might take their advice and you learn by doing and then say, oh, that's probably not the best method that's out there.
Yeah, I'd also put this out there: is use your common sense. It's not as complicated as it can appear. It's just on the level of why do you spit your toothpaste out? That kind of thing. It's simple, and there's a reason that your dentist. If you can ask your dentist, why would we ingest fluorine? And there really is no mechanism within the human body, and so a lot of that idea of how things get to the point at which they are is from people. I have an opinion of this, and I connected with these kinds of concepts like 12 years ago, and I didn't believe a lot of what I believe now, and I've had that experience, of really trying to open my mind to things that weren't taught to me. And I'm a very big believer that if you only know what you're taught, you're never going to know a thing. You really have to ask yourself these questions personally. And when you get to a point where most of the farmers in this country don't eat their own food, you start to kind of say, well, what the hell's going on here? And there's a quote by Rudolf Steiner. He was the founder of, or not really the founder, but he brought forward, I should say, the biodynamic method back in 1924. And he was asked by one of his students at the time. He was, you spend so much time trying to communicate these spiritual truths and impulses, and very few people really take you up on it. And isn't that discouraging? And why is that? And he said, no. He said the reason for that is a matter of nutrition. And in a nutshell, what he said is that the food no longer contains the forces people need to carry their will into action. And when I read that line, it just it still gives me the chills, because it's for me the truth of the whole scenario is that we are all a part of this. Let's say this country or this world or however you want to look at it, or this town or whatever it may be. And we can know that things aren't being done the way that we would like them done, but we all let them happen anyway. And I'm part of that. I'm not trying to be, stand on a soapbox here, but I think the idea is that we're so malnourished on a level of just life force, of being able to carry our will into action, that we can just stand idly by and look at these things and maybe complain about them. But it's really tough to get that critical mass of doing that. And, the wheatgrass that we grow, which I'd love to connect with you on a show sometime on that alone. But, I've seen that change people. within a matter of a week, people taking their lives into their own hands in a way that they couldn't have a week ago, simply because they nourish themselves with something that is so potent and so full of life force. So, it's just an interesting thought to carry that out. And if you can challenge yourself to, enhance your diet by growing your own food or seeking out a local source, you can help other people do it as well. And that's really what it's all about.
And I will say, with my journey of doing this show and learning what I've been eating and what our health is about, part of it is growing my own food at home. And a lot of it has been microgreens or wheatgrass or really easy crops that have been grown in short amount of time. But they're also very nutritious, and they taste so much better than going to McDonald's down the road and grabbing something and saying, well, is that actually lettuce on there? And then you have to think back of the process of, was it grown with chemicals? What kind of water are they using? You get all of these questions that compound it and say, but I know I did this at home, and I got my seeds from a reputable source, and I know what kind of water I'm using, and it tastes so much better, and you start to feel better too with this different stuff that's out there. And it's the same thing as everyone drinks pop. I'll say pop. Some people call it soda. That is what people drink instead of water. And just replacing one pop a day with 24 ounces of water, you're going to see a huge change in some of that stuff. So what are you ingesting? What are you drinking? And a lot of it is, why are we drinking all of these empty calories when we can just have water and feel a little bit better that way?
Yeah, absolutely. The water defines life. It's what we look for on other planets to tell us whether something lived there or not. And that tells you everything, so it really is the backbone of all. And it's funny, last night I connected with, and I'm not going to remember the guy's name, and I can find it for you if you wanted to follow up on it. But this guy basically had determined a way of creating of electrolysis, of splitting hydrogen and oxygen and creating energy. And there's been there's a lot of conspiratorial things along that line. And I'll share this, and you can edit it out if you'd like, but it's true because I know the guy. He was actually he figured out how to drive from Wilmington, North Carolina to Miami and back on 14 gallons of water. And he retrofitted his car. And by the time that I met him, this was maybe 2 years ago, he was kind of paranoid at the time. I think he had some people driving by his house, he was telling me, and I kind of was like, oh, that's pretty crazy, and I didn't think too much of it. And fast forward 2 years later, and this guy had just gotten out of Camp Lejeune, which is an hour north of me, and was picked up by Homeland Security and threatened. And he basically was told that you need to, not pursue your research or else. And his teeth were falling out, and he had an image of a tumor that he had to extract from himself. He had to go to Germany to do it. So, again, that's, quite conspiratorial, not being in my position here to be able to prove it. But the point being is that there is a very huge potential in regards to what we can do in changing how we use energy and how we get the benefit out of using fertilizers and growing plants. And you can vortex water versus not with the same water source on a cloned plant and get a growth response from the water alone.
I will say, typically when people are watering or giving fertilizer to their plants, so you typically measure it by EC or by ppm, and that's how much fertilizer they're giving into their plants. And you were saying with structuring your water, you can actually use less fertilizers to put onto your plants. How does that work out?
Yeah, well, water its real role, if you boil it down, is to bring oxygen and nutrition to a cell and then carry away the toxins. So if your cells are not able to access it, and that was proven by that research in chemistry of the discovery of the aquaporin, there's over 90 different parameters of water that can be measured and manipulated: resistivity, conductivity, pH, surface tension, specific gravity, on and on. I don't know them all, but there's over 90 based on new science. So the idea is there's a huge complexity there, and it's not to try to reverse engineer. It's like trying to make ocean water. We're going to fall short. There's just, we're trying to make a worm casting or even explain how it is a worm's gut and the microbes in there, end up 10 times higher in calcium than what they ate. It's alchemy, and again, it's the further that you look, the less you know. So the human mind in a modern scientific method approach tries to rip it all apart to find the truth in it, where it's really in the whole, and you can't measure it in the way that we've established is true and not. So, as far as the water goes, when you have that molecular structure of the water correct, and again, that's not a measurable place. It's more of, you can do this through frequency, through magnetism. You can do it through vortexing and implosion. There's a guy named Victor Schauberger that spent his life patenting different models and forms that created implosion and regenerated water, and you compel it through pipes rather than have to push it. So water acts in these very strange ways, but a very easy way to connect with it is surface tension. If you can measurably reduce the surface tension in water, which most people are familiar with, little bugs on a lake, or the meniscus in a glass, or wax a car and the water beads up. It's hugging itself. It's hydrogen bonding. The positive hydrogen is attracted to the negative oxygen. The more that it hugs itself, the less available it is to a cell. So what happens is when you're using fertilizer in dead water, which you're going to assume that water is dead unless you've regenerated it or energized it in some way, that essentially it's just physically delivering it into the plant. It's not feeding the cell. And it's the same way in a human. You can drink all the water that you're required to drink, but it's really not hydrating you on that level of cellular hydration, which is really all that matters. Otherwise you're just irrigating your kidneys, like I was saying. So that ability to have a greater absorption into cells is really what it's bound by. And incidentally, that's also a bit of the difference between a salt-based hydroponic fertilizer versus a more natural organic fertilizer, is that Mother Nature makes the organics available, not the pH. So that ability to connect in the way that nature works means you need to use less of it, or that you get a greater benefit with a different parts per million. And it's a bit of a gray area. I don't know that there's anybody that's definitively communicated the differences between concentration of a natural product versus a hydroponic nutrient. But I can spray a plant with 2,000 parts per million of earth tonic, a product that we make in our compost tea recipe, and the plant loves it. And I can do the same with a base hydroponic nutrient, and it'll burn it all up. So the only thing that I can really draw from that is that there's a balance there that is deliberate, and it turns out, as just kind of another step down that road, that the balance, mineral balance in ocean water mimics human blood. So it actually reinforces the balance, and you can take that sodium chloride approach. A lot of the sodium that's discouraged through doctors, processed foods and these things is sodium chloride. Well, that's because it's only sodium and chlorine. It's not that those are contaminants. Those are vital for life. So if we can think about this balance approach and then combine that, especially with water that's more able to deliver it, you can do so much more using so much less. And that's really one of the main metrics of our business approach, is trying to connect with growers and farmers that are looking to reduce the amount of resources and at the same time mitigate the pests and disease and weed issues that they have through an approach of balance rather than trying to, kill their problems. So it's a bit like, don't take the pill, change your diet. That's kind of a conversation we rarely have with ourselves, unfortunately. And that's really kind of the backbone of what we're talking about here.
So for Progress Earth, obviously you guys do the Vortex Brewer, and that's something that we're brewing compost tea in and structuring the water with. That's the correct way to say that.
Sure.
So you guys are actually known for, obviously, your Vortex Brewers. I've used them. I've seen them. I've used the compost tea for years from the Vortex Brewer. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into your guys' Vortex Brewers?
Yeah, well, one of the things about the Vortex Brewer is it can be used for more than just making compost tea. That's the way most people connect with it on. And it's very accomplished at doing that. Vortexing water, even using the same water pump and the same air pump and the same volume of water with air stones, which incidentally the Vortex Brewer does not use air stones because it exposes the surface area through the circulation rather than through breaking up bubbles. You don't have to aerate a river. So it works off of that concept of creating the circulation and then not only exposing the surface area, but sucking that oxygen into the solution. So you're going to attain about a full part per million higher dissolved oxygen. But what's really fascinating is that also it measurably retains the oxygen for much longer periods of time. And that's one of the things that people don't focus on when they're talking about DO. They're looking at how much can I push in. Well, it's not only how much you can push in, but how much can it hold on to when it's gone, for example. And so, these ideas, again, are not exactly, what we're trained to look at, but are totally relevant and can be connected to with the person, even if they don't want to engage the energetic homeopathic aspects of it. But so making compost tea is one thing. A recipe is earth compound, earth tonic, earth syrup, and earth kelp. And you've got what the microbe source is earth compound. Earth tonic is a mineral catalyst, which is important for allowing the microbes all of the tools they need to make the enzymes to eat the food sources of the earth syrup and the earth kelp. And you brew tea by waiting at least 12 hours and waiting until all trophic levels of microbes are alive, and then using them in your solution. And it's a bit like, adding the yeast to make the bread, if you will. So a lot of our larger growers use the brewer as a means of making what we call field sprays. And it's not a biological approach per se. You get some biological relevance, but you have to wait 12 hours in a brew because you have to wait for the higher organisms, primarily the nematodes and the protozoa, to get up to speed, to wake up and put their feet on the ground, if you will. With a field spray, what you're doing is using the implosion of the vortex brewer to imprint the vibration of the materials you use within it into the water, so that you can then use a tablespoon of earth compound and a tablespoon of earth tonic, stir that for an hour in the vortex brewer, and then spray that out 5 gallons of solution to an acre of land and get a measurable result. Now, the first time that I connected with that possibility, I didn't believe it. And I'm 12 years deep, and I'm desensitized to it because I've seen it work so many times. But the idea, and there's a guy named Nassim Harriman, and he's got a project called the Resonance Project, the Power of Spin. I don't know, maybe some people have seen some of the videos out there. And there's other people going towards this idea, but his one thing that he hits on that I think is helpful to connect with is that 99.9% of matter is space, and we're used to thinking about the physicality of things, but we completely discount what holds it together and gives it life. And this idea of using these vibrations in this 99.9% space material environment allows the plant to respond to it in immeasurable amounts of physical material, using the water as a delivery mechanism. So what we instruct people to do is, year one, you get the microbes into the soil by stimulating that as often as possible through brewing teas and growing high concentrations. And then year two going forward, you can step off of that and use it as a field spray. And we also have people that use specifically several wheatgrass growers that use the vortex brewer just to structure their water. They don't even use it biologically at all. They just use it to basically
Structure.
Energize the water, to feed their plants, and they notice tremendous differences.
So if people want to learn more information about Progress Earth, what is the website?
ProgressEarth.com is the corporate website. Our sales website is vortexbrewer.com. You can actually go there and enter in to win a free Vortex Brewer. We give one away every month. So I'd definitely invite people to go fill out a form. It'll kick you also a free report, Compost Tea Miracle Fertilizer, that goes through a lot of the metrics of how to think about microbes and mineral balance. And we call it bioenergetics. The idea that there's a physical, mineral, biological, and energetic component to life. And if you're not working with all of those components, then you're not getting the full potential of your garden. And it dovetails the actual practicality of it. If you look at conventional farming, it's physical and it's mineral. You plow and you fertilize. Organics begins to incorporate the biological aspects. And biodynamics, as a method of farming, addresses the energetic, but it completely ignores, by definition, the mineral balance and the biological relevance. So what we try to do is kind of bring all of that to the table and introduce people ways in which people can work with those. And so, if you've got a farm or a backyard garden or, an indoor garden or a hydroponic garden or whatever it may be, the beautiful thing about what we do is it really applies to anything that grows. It's not a compartmentalized approach. So we'd love to talk to you.
And I've read that report, and I will say there was some really good information in there. So definitely
cool.
Check out the website and see what information they have out there. And Evan, you're also a writer, so you're in quite a few different magazines that are out there. You're just a good plethora of just information that's out there. So definitely check out some of the different things that Evan's written in the past. Check out Progress Earth, and thank you so much for just talking a little bit about water today. I know that people will enjoy some of the conversation that we had, because there's some great information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for what you do and for having me. Look forward to being
thank
back.
you. So I have to say, this is Emily with The Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com.
It will, and that's a fair point.
Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, someone bless these seeds I sowed. Someone warm them from below till the rain comes tumbling down.
We're listening to DFCRadio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com. Hey, Dr. Duff, are you signing up for another one of those internet dating sites after your divorce?
Nah, I'm just ordering these freaking douchebags from China here. Just gonna be saving a lot of money on it. About $1 a bag.
Did you say douchebags?
Yeah, they're pots. They're fabric pots. They're, made in China. They save $1 a bag from all the other.
Oh, it sounds like an imitation smart pot or something.
Yeah, save $1, but, I'm pretty sure these douchebags are gonna work.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine who used those same douchebags. He bought them direct from China. It killed his whole garden.
Bro, what? So I'm better off spending that extra $1 on a smart pot?
I'd get a smart pot.
Don't be a Duff man. Make sure to buy the original patented Smart Pot. Check them out at smartpots.com.
dfcradio.com.
A girl in a garden question of the week. And this was posted in a few different forums. And the question is, why do I get sensitive when I touch certain plants in the garden? And specifically, these plants would be tomato plants, squash, zucchini, it seems like are the offending ones. Some people, when they're working in the garden, if you are not wearing gloves, you can get really bad rashes on your arms from working with these plants. And it seems like the prickly plants, like the squash and the zucchini, I can't touch it at all unless I'm wearing gloves. So it is normal for some people to have irritation when working with these plants. Tomatoes, they are a nightshade. They can cause some sensitivity. I find that when I'm working with them and I'm picking tomatoes, totally cool. When I am pruning my plants, so if I'm cutting back my tomato plants, I'm cutting them, they're just kind of secreting some stuff, I get super sensitive, and you have to wear gloves with them. Same with squash and zucchini, and I have crookneck squash growing in my garden. I was cutting off some of the diseased leaves, ones that were dying back. I was going to throw them in the compost, and by the end of the day, my whole arm had broken out in hives. So some of the things you can do to prevent that is, when working in the garden, when working with those specific plants, wear long sleeve shirts if it's an option. You can also use gloves, that helps. And for some reason, if you touch the offending plants, wash with a good soap and water. And I like to keep some garden soap with me. I'm working in a community garden plot, so I have soap and all that stuff that I need in my kind of community garden kit. So when I'm ready to leave the garden, I wash my hands, and usually all the way up to my elbows is what I have to wash, so I do not get rashes from my tomato or squash plants. Now, if you are seeing that you're getting rashes when you're working in the garden, always make sure to scout your plants and check that you don't have any other plants that you might actually be allergic to, or anything like poison ivy, poison oak growing in your garden, because if you do have that growing, you want to remove that right away. You also might want to check with your doctor if you're getting sensitivity and rashes. But from what I have found, and I'm not a medical doctor, so don't take this as medical advice, but I've found that certain people do have sensitivity, and using clothing, gloves, and good soap and water, and not itching when you're working in the garden, is going to drastically reduce the outbreaks that you can get from it. So it is a common occurrence for a lot of people, and it's a common question in the garden forums. So there you go, Girl in a Garden question of the week.
This is Gardening in 2 Minutes. When it comes to baking, there's more choices out there than just plain old all-purpose flour, and healthier choices in that.
When you cook with or bake with plain white all-purpose flour, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a time and place for it, especially in a cake or in certain desserts, because that's all that's what is preferable. But in situations where you're baking other things like bread or cookies or some sort of snack, it's a good idea to think about using a different type of flour. These type of flours usually will provide more fiber for you, more nutrients, and just a heartier substance for you to have in your whatever you're making. You can also use these alternatives to flour to the all-purpose flour to do things like coat things, and then to thicken things as well. So, for example, when I make gravy, I use spelt flour as opposed to white flour. I know it's going to add a little bit. You can't really taste it because you're going to add the stock or whatever, the cream to it anyway. But you can definitely see that it's a different color and it's going to add more nutrients. So there's different alternatives. There's also gluten-free things like nut flours, and those are grain-free as well. So like almond flour, hazelnut flour, coconut flour. I make a really great waffle that is made with coconut flour and eggs, so it's grain-free. A lot of people are turning to this because they're trying to have less grains and they're trying to have less gluten.
For more information on alternatives to bleach flour, all-purpose flour that is, our weekly video productions, as well as our free downloadable digital quarterly magazine, you can find all that information at
the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com.
For the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide. For Gardening in 2 Minutes, I'm Joy Baird.
And I'm Holly Baird.
Welcome back to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com. This is your host, Emily. Big thank you to Evan Folds for being a guest on A Girl in a Garden and talking about water, which is an amazing thing that we all need to survive. Unfortunately, we're in California. I hope that we can just stop bottling water for large corporations and be able to use it for the people who live in California. But that is a different tangent that I could go on for quite a while. So, next week, I am going to be talking about transplanting plants. And one of the things that I did in my garden this week is I'm somewhat deconstructing my community garden plots. There's some plants that it's too late to replant them. They're too big. They're too established. I have some tomato plants. I'm going to water them and get some tomatoes out of there. But I might not have them till the end of season. So what I'm doing is transplanting a lot of my stuff into containers to take to my new garden space, because I just rented a cabin, or I guess it would be considered a cottage in Sonoma County, and I have my own garden in my backyard. And it's an untouched garden that no one's really weeded. There's 4 tomato plants. They water every once in a while, but otherwise it's very untouched space. And it's about a 45-foot by 15-foot area in the backyard. So I am going to build a whole new garden that is in my backyard. So I will be taking a lot of my plants that are growing in my community garden, transplanting them and bringing them to my new garden and creating a new space. So it's halfway through the season. Does that mean you can't garden? Absolutely not, because I live in a garden area that is year-round gardening. So we're going to talk about transplanting and starting with new spaces. I have a lot of weeding to do. What's the best thing for weeding? Should I cover it with cardboard? Should I let the weeds die out? Should I do them all by hand? Should I rototill them? What should I do? So we'll be exploring some of these options. And the great thing is it's in my backyard, so I can start doing a lot more videos of what's going on as well. It's really hard doing the videos in the community garden space. First, because it's in such an open area right next to a school where it's very loud. And there's other people gardening all around. And sometimes it's hard to do videos because I don't want gardeners to end up in my background shots without asking them. And I would rather it show my garden and not other people's gardens. Unless I'm specifically asking to look at other people's gardens. So lots of new discussions on how to start a new garden and transplanting, bringing in your other plants, prepping the soil. I have no idea what the soil's like. So how to build a new garden when you move into a new place. And I move in starting tomorrow. So we have a 3-day weekend and I'm going to spend some of that time gardening, and we'll get some great new content for A Girl in a Garden. Now, if you are interested in being a guest, having an interview done, talking about advertising, please send me an email. It's agirlinagarden@gmail.com. Or if it's for advertising on DFC Radio, you can talk to Aaliyah, and that's ALEA. Let me rephrase that. ALEA at dfcradio.com. She can help you out. I'd also love to hear about new products, new gardening things, community gardens, everything that's going on. So send me your information. If you have questions, suggestions, gardening stuff, send me an email, or you can also post it on the Facebook page. And until next time, this is Emily on dfcradio.com.